Hello, everybody. Welcome back to some more mystery book. We are on, well, we're still going through chapter 5, and hopefully we can get through the rest of it on this one here. I mean, there's still quite a few pages left before we get to chapter 6, but we'll find out. All right. So we were talking about DARPA, cyborgs, Dr. Evil, and all that good stuff. Okay, so let's just pick back up. But Harari seems most thrilled by the possibility of non-biological life as the solution to those troublesome human beings who can be so difficult to organize into an army that can then be ordered to bayonet people the government doesn't like. But even then, the army might not follow your orders unless you convince them the people they're going to bayonet are really bad people, like those who might claim the votes need to be recounted in an election. We all know that asking for validation of a vote is the same thing as inciting an insurrection. Harari explains how we might get rid of human beings entirely. And this is what he says. The third way to change the laws of life is to engineer completely inorganic beings. The most obvious examples are computer programs that can undergo independent evolution. Recent advances in machine learning already enable present-day computer programs to evolve by themselves. Though the program is initially coded by human engineers, it could subsequently acquire new information on its own, teach itself new skills, and gain insights that go beyond those of its human creators. The computer program is therefore free to evolve in directions its makers could never have envisaged. Harari sounds like such a proud parent, doesn't he? It's like he gave birth to a computer program. And if the machine starts to misbehave, well, unlike a human being, you can just turn it off. What if your laptop could also be your brain? Good point. So another excerpt from Harari goes as follows. Imagine another possibility. Suppose you could back up your brain to a portable hard drive and then run it on your laptop. Would your laptop be able to think and feel just like sapiens? If so, would it be you or someone else? What if computer programmers could create an entirely new but digital mind, composed of computer code, complete with a sense of self-consciousness and memory? If you ran the program on your computer, would it be a person? If you deleted it, could you be charged with murder? If you believe Harari is going to simply stop with intelligent machines, you are sorely mistaken. He believes these intelligent machines will eventually take over, an event he and many others call the singularity. In case you were having a little trouble working up the intellectual energy to consider his plans for the suicide of the human race, he helpfully highlights his genocidal plans in a section titled The Singularity. From that section, it goes as follows. Most science fiction plots describe a world in which sapiens, identical to us, enjoy superior technology, such as light-speed spaceships and laser guns. The ethical and political dilemmas central to these plots are taken from our own world, and they merely recreate our emotional and social tensions against a futuristic backdrop. Yet, the real potential of future technologies is to change Homo sapiens itself, including our emotions and desires, and not merely our vehicles and weapons. What is a spaceship compared to an eternally young cyborg who does not breed and has no sexuality, who can share thoughts directly with other beings, whose abilities to focus and remember are 1,000 times greater than our own, and who is never angry or sad, but has emotions and desires that we cannot begin to imagine. Do you think this is a future that could ever win wide acceptance among the general public? Harari hopes you do not breed, never have sex, and instead share thoughts directly with other beings, and that you will never be angry or sad and have emotions and desires that we cannot begin to imagine. Does this sound like any human future of which you want to be a part of? Again, Harari reminds me of a crazed religious zealot, so disgusted by the flesh that he only wants to exist in the spiritual world. Yet at the same time, there's nothing spiritual about it. But because Harari recognizes no God or spiritual plane of existence, he tries to fill the God-shaped hole in his soul with technology. However, for those of us who do acknowledge a spiritual reality, this is an old and familiar tale. It is the common story of one who does not acknowledge the Creator, and in doing so, seeks to supplant him. In the religious traditions of the world, those who walk this path risk becoming demons and devils, the most hideous creatures in all creation. Well, I think it's just a lack of love. There was something missing. But it's also what a psychopath is, right? There's literally that part in their brain that is missing or does not connect, where it produces the feeling of empathy. But that's still very mysterious in itself of why that happens. You could also say, though, that there could be a trace to whether it's viruses or, food, poisons in the food, medicines, all that kind of stuff, could attribute to that. It's like that saying, it's like a Buddhist saying or a Taoist, pretty much the same thing, but it's like when you find a cure to something, it's that balance. So you can find a cure to something, but there's always going to be another thing that it takes from. So you're going to always have to wrestle with pros and cons in every situation. It's not always going to be completely perfect. So you could find a cure to something, but then by finding that cure, that can offset a different part of the body, therefore depriving it of something that is needed to develop over time to maintain and sustain healthy levels of chemicals and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm just purely theorizing all this in my own mind of the possibilities, but I really know nothing about how that works. So I'm still learning constantly. Anyways, back to what the book is saying. In the afterword, the animal who became a god, he proudly declares his heresy. 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens was still an insignificant animal minding its own business in a corner of Africa. In the following millennia, it transformed itself into the master of the entire planet and the terror of the ecosystem. Today it stands on the verge of becoming a god, poised to acquire not only eternal youth, but also the divine abilities of creation and destruction. We know the type of future Harari envisions for human beings: genetic manipulation, robotic enhancements, and non-organic life that eventually rules over us. But we know who the real rulers will be: the globalists, like with Klaus Schwab, or his downloaded brain giving us all orders from his laptop, or the people that we never see, which I think there's a lot of them that are never named and we have no idea about, honestly. But yeah, sure, he's like the front man. In his next book, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, Harari provides more details on his preferred future. Part 1 is titled Homo sapiens conquers the world, and part 2 is Homo sapiens gives meaning to the world, essentially a recap of many of the points he made in Sapiens. Part 3, Homo sapiens loses control, is where Harari really gets going with his futuristic plans in a chapter titled The Time Bomb in the Laboratory. Now, you might be forgiven if you thought the chapter was about China and the United States experimenting with dangerous bat viruses and how one escaped, causing a worldwide pandemic and killing millions, but you'd be mistaken. Instead, this is what Harari had to say. In 2016, the world is dominated by the liberal package of individualism, human rights, democracy, and the free market. Yet, 21st century science is undermining the foundations of the liberal order. Because science does not deal with questions of value, it cannot determine whether liberals are right in valuing liberty more than equality, or in valuing the individual more than the collective. However, like every other religion, liberalism, too, is based not only on abstract ethical judgments, but also on what it believes to be factual statements. And these factual statements just don't stand up to rigorous scientific scrutiny. In Harari's vision, if you like individualism, human rights, democracy, and the free market, you're just a deluded fool. It's all part of some imagined order, rather than a system developed by brilliant, compassionate people over the centuries as the most effective way for us to live together in a manner that is conducive to the greatest good for the largest number of people. If you don't believe Harari is interested in tearing down all these pillars of a civil society, I offer this passage. This is another one from his book. To the best of our scientific understanding, determinism and randomness have divided the entire cake between them, leaving not even a crumb for freedom. The sacred word freedom turns out to be, just like soul, a hollow term empty of any discernible meaning. Free will exists only in the imaginary stories we humans have invented. Such a sad thing to read. It staggers the mind that the person who wrote these words this is not from Harari, actually. Hold on. I'm going to read this again. I thought this was another excerpt from his book. It staggers the mind that the person who wrote those words is not universally condemned by all the supposed lovers of freedom. One almost imagines they're reading the words of a young Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin rather than the writings of an Israeli academic. If there's no such thing as free will, how could anybody ever be prosecuted for rape, murder, or any crime? This is a version of hell where nothing is forbidden and all things are permitted. After attacking liberalism all through the chapter, even equating medieval crusaders and today's liberals as similarly delusional, Harari lays it out. However, I don't know if that was from his book. I didn't really, maybe it was from his book, but this is another part from Harari's book. However, once the heretical scientific insights are translated into everyday technology, routine activities, and economic structures, it will become increasingly difficult to sustain this double game, believing in science and free will, and we, or our heirs, would probably require a brand new package of religious beliefs and political institutions At the beginning of the third millennium, liberalism is threatened not by the idea that there are no free individuals, but rather by concrete technologies. We're about to face a flood of extremely useful devices, tools, and structures that make no allowance for the free will of individual humans. Will democracy, the free market, and human rights survive this flood? It's genuinely comical to read how people like Harari believe that technological changes will bring about these massive changes to society. These same arguments were being made by Zbigniew Brzezinski in the 1970s. The World War II order is breaking down. Highways now link one side of the country to another. People can pick up the phone on the West Coast and immediately talk to somebody on the East Coast. We have planes that can take your family to Europe in just a few hours. You can heat your dinner in just a few minutes in a microwave oven. Sadly, none of these technological marvels created the breathtaking changes the globalists thought they would provoke. In his chapter titled The Great Decoupling, this is what Harari predicts for the 21st century. Number one, humans will lose their economic and military usefulness. Hence, the economic and political system will stop attaching much value to them. Number two, the system will continue to find value in humans collectively, but not in unique individuals. Number three, the system will still find value in some unique individuals, but these will constitute a new elite of upgraded superhumans rather than the mass of the population. You can't say that Harari doesn't have big plans. It's just that they're insane. The ravings of a dictator in training. One wonders how he might retain the simplest of human relations. Does he tell his significant other he has no free will? I wonder how his partner feels, though, about the whole eternally young cyborg sexless and non-breeding plan. That must have prompted at least a few discussions in their relationship. If you've been curious as to what people mean when they talk about transhumanism, this is your answer. You will be a biological organism with machine upgrades, and those upgrades will come at the cost of stripping you of what is the most human thing about you. After writing several passages showing how humans will be less valuable to the system in the years to come, and governments will care less about them, Harari documents what he sees as the final threat to liberalism. The third threat to liberalism is that some people will remain both indispensable and undecipherable, but they will constitute a small and privileged elite of upgraded humans. These superhumans will enjoy unheard of abilities and unprecedented creativity, which will allow them to go on making many of the most important decisions in the world. They will perform crucial services for the system, while the system could neither understand or manage them. However, most humans will not be upgraded and will consequently become an inferior caste dominated by both computer algorithms and the new superhumans. I'm genuinely trying to resist making Nazi comparisons in this book, but it's so difficult when these globalists start using expressions like new superhumans. Harari is enamored of the idea that some people will rule and others will become part of an inferior caste. It's not too much of a leap to wonder if the globalists might decide at some point that this inferior caste no longer warrants continued survival and needs to be liquidated. Harari's messianic fervor appears to recognize no bounds. When people scoff at claims that these globalists are setting up a new religion, they might want to read what they say in their books. And it goes as this: the new religions are unlikely to emerge from the caves of Afghanistan or from the madrasas of the Middle East. Rather, they will emerge from research laboratories, just as socialism took over the world by promising salvation through steam, and electricity. So in the coming decades, new techno-religions may conquer the world by promising salvation through algorithms and genes. Despite all the talk of radical Islam or Christian fundamentalism, the most interesting place in the world from a religious perspective is not the Islamic State or the Bible Belt, but Silicon Valley. That's where high-tech gurus are brewing for us brave new religions that have little to do with God and everything to do with technology. What does a person do when they realize that all the crazy claims made about these globalists are pretty close to the truth? These globalists do want to dethrone God from his throne in heaven and place themselves in charge. That's not hyperbole, but straight from their own writings. At the end of Homo Deus, Harari provides his 3 main points. Number 1, science is converging on an all-encompassing dogma which says that organisms are algorithms and life is data processing. Number 2, intelligence is decoupling from consciousness. Number 3, non-conscious but highly intelligent algorithms may soon know us better than we know ourselves. Homo Deus literally means man is God. That is what the globalists are pushing. If there is one thing that religion has done, it is to cause people to consider things outside of themselves. It is religion that caused people to worry about feeding the poor, educating the young, removing people from slavery, and making sure that all enjoy equal opportunity. At its best, religion breaks down walls, requiring people to see others as fellow children of God, all equally valuable. By agreeing that all people have value, there can be no impulse to harm or rid ourselves of them. The more people embrace equality and freedom, the closer they are to God's natural order. When one understands the philosophical underpinnings of a belief in God, it becomes clear that these globalists are nothing less than an opposition force to that belief. What else would you call an opposition force to God other than devils and demons? I wonder how much more there is. There's still quite a few more. Ooh, I think I might just leave it there though, because it's like for 20 minutes. I think next time we'll be able to finish the rest of chapter 5. So for now, I think I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, that part, because I imagine it as I'm reading this, the imagery pops up within my mind, and I envision a world at an extreme to that. If that were to happen, never say never, but also never lose hope that humanity can survive and pull through. But like I said, I mean, you can't really say never to something. And especially if people remain unaware of things, it just makes it easier for those who have all the strings to pull, we're definitely living in some interesting times, I would say. Very interesting times right now. I mean, just last week on Friday, RFK Jr. and Trump united. And I'd like to know your guys' thoughts about that. I mean, obviously he's not like uniting fully. They're creating more unity together and not being like enemies and having hate towards each other, which is refreshing to see for once. So that is definitely some hope. But I would like to know your guys' views on what you think about that. And I think that is what we need right now. we need to have more unifying influence and more. We just need to turn a new leaf, you know? We need to stop having this, like, this division, and we're not divided, you know? We're only as divided as we allow. And I don't want to allow that, you know? I personally don't want to allow that. I think that's the worst thing. And why would you want to put yourself through that miserable, like, way of life? But, you know, it's definitely something that we must, it's like you up and down, because we're constantly being tested. And, you know, two wrongs don't make a right. So, anyway, that was a good read. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will read the rest of chapter 5 next time. And peace out.